I'm Deputy Chief of Police for the Albuquerque Police Department. I'm in charge of our Field Services Bureau, which is the largest bureau of the department, which is basically all uniformed officers, the area commands, the staff at those area commands, and our Special Operations section, which includes SWAT, K9, open space, EOD, and horse mounting. I retired from the Albuquerque Police Department in December of 2014. After serving 20 years, I was retired as the commander of property crimes. I was in charge of property crimes during 2010 and 11. And that was during a time frame when we had our last biggest decreases in crime in the city. And one of the first times that we fell out of the top 10 for our department of about 52 officers. And in December of 2017, I got a phone call that said, "Hey, come on back. You'll enjoy it. There's a lot of great things going on." I had a good relationship with the chief. I really enjoyed the mayor, and I decided that I would forego my retirement and I'd return back to the city. One of the biggest things that we dealt with as a department that I knew that we could do better was community policing. And we're going to give a recap of everything that's going on in the department, because in the end you'll see how they're all intertwined with one another. But one of the biggest things that we needed to do was to illuminate a path forward so that we could ignite transformation. We know the department needed transformation. I'm the first one to tell you that without a doubt, DOJ was here for a reason. There are a lot of things that occurred that the department did that we needed to do better. One of them was transparency with the public. Our officers needed to be updated on their training in terms of use of force. So there's a lot of issues that were going on that I think that brought us to the point that we were at. Of course, there was things beyond that. There were things such as changes in the retirement system, which caused mass exodus of officers retiring. There were changes in the criminal justice system with bail reform that increased crime rates. So it wasn't just one thing. There was a ton of things that just happened to hit the city at the same time. So when we came back to the police department, we identified 4 priorities. Number one, crime. We knew we were number one in auto theft. We were in the top 2 for both overall auto theft and property crimes. Our recruiting, we were down to academy classes of 7, some as large as 20. The department was down to 850 officers, and they publicized it that we're only down 150. The deceiving part was the fact that they had just picked up 50 officers from the airport, which are dedicated to the airport, that truly weren't reflective into the numbers. So 850 didn't mean 850 from the past. And as we talk about this, when you see that the number of officers that we've had to devote to the settlement agreement, 800 isn't what 800 used to be, because we've had to fill officers in other areas of the department. Community policing, you'd ask most officers, you'd ask most commanders at the time, what does community policing mean? And you'd hear stories of officers going out, shaking hands, talking to people, riding bikes. Community policing has a definite definition, and we'll go over that definition in a while. But community policing and public relations, they go hand in hand, but they do mean 2 different things that we're going to discuss and we're going to talk about. And the last thing is the settlement agreement. We have to comply with the settlement agreement. I believe that it's important because it's a way to regain public trust. Obviously, we got in the position we were because there was a loss of public trust, whether it was with a great amount of the city or it was a small amount. Either way, we have to improve our image and we have to work more closely with the community to gain their support. Because the police department can't make the changes alone. We need the community support. We need to make sure that we have tough conversations with the community beforehand and not the morning after a tragic incident. Mayor Keller's talking about the concept of one Albuquerque. That concept actually goes hand in hand with community policing. The first principle of community policing is partnership building. And as we build partnerships and we work as one, the concept of one Albuquerque fits in perfectly. Community policing, the perfect example of what he's talking about. Many unique communities throughout Albuquerque. As we talk about our community policing plan, we'll talk about how we're designating special responses for every part of town based upon their needs. Each has its own unique challenge, having to work with the community to identify the barriers to safe neighborhoods and agree to solutions. The key to building community partnerships starts with collaboration, cooperation, and trust between the police and the people they serve. So that covers everything we talked about, is why we have to, how this is tied into the settlement agreement, how this is tied into recruiting and retention, and all these things go hand in hand. The first thing we want to do is we have a new philosophy of community engagement. To us, it starts at the academy level. This past academy class was the first academy class where we recognized what we want to emphasize is the accepted behavior and the direction we want to go. Historically, the Albuquerque Police Department, they gave awards for the most physically fit. Doing this job 25 years and a few injuries later, I probably wouldn't win that award. They gave the award for the best Top Gun. They gave the award for the best academic grades. This last academy class was the first academy class where we recognized the top communicator, because 90% of our job is communication, if not more. Everyday uses of force can be avoided if we have good, strong communication. Getting the public support and working with the community is a big part of the new direction of the department, and the academy is broken into different squads of officers. One squad was recognized for their community outreach during the course of the academy. The things we did at the academy was start installing communication and community outreach at the very beginning of their training. So that is one of the fundamental values that they carry forth with them for the entirety of their career. Our officers for the first time went to, who's familiar with National Night Out? This was the first year that cadets went out to National Night Out to contact the public. Coffee with the Cop. Our cadets were required to attend Coffee with the Cop events. Our cadets went out and helped other organizations with their projects within the community. We wanted to develop the philosophy that community engagement is the core of what the Albuquerque Police Department is, and as we continue to go forward, we'll continue to refine that process. We have different groups of individuals, special interest groups, whether they be related to ethnicity, race, faith-based organizations. We have a great variety of different groups that go in during the lunch hour and just kind of give our officers in training a little bit of cultural update on what they can expect in different parts of the community. Cadets have attended National Night Out, Coffee with the Cop, Memorial Run. Ashley Browder was the female that was killed by the APD sergeant who ran at red lights. The city paid out on it. We've really used that point to emphasize to our cadets the importance of driving safely in the community, ensuring that we are not responding in a way that endangers the rest of the community. And we kind of use that as a sticking point to make sure that our cadets understand that we're out in the community and lives are sometimes at stakes with our actions. This past Christmas storm a few days ago, we talked about it. We made the decision that we would curb calls for service if there wasn't an emergency. An officer could take a report at a later time, because we also create that hazard out on the highway. The less cars out in the highway, the less hazard for everybody else, especially those that do have to travel. There are some individuals that do not have the luxury of work being called off. So I think it's a change in philosophy, and not only for officers, but us as management, what we're going to do during incidents. These are kind of our guiding principles of what we've developed for the department. A commitment to education. We know that if we want Albuquerque to succeed, one of the ways we need Albuquerque to succeed is that our education of the kids in schools needs to occur. If kids graduate, the more likely it is that they will go to college. The less likely that they will become criminals. Just getting them through that time frame and getting a degree opens so many doors. So we have a lot of youth outreach because of that commitment to education. One of the programs that we've developed that will kick off this next May and June, actually June, is a program that we started with CNM. I am a first-generation college student. after I went to college, my sister graduated from college. My two daughters, have one daughter who graduated from college and one that's a senior at UNM. My wife is 46 years old, 7 years old, and she is a senior in college at this point in time right now. So what we're doing is we've developed a course with CNM where we're going to target at-risk youth in different parts of town. And they will go to this 80-hour course at CNM, and at the end of the course they will be registered for CNM, and they will have received their first 3 credit hours in an introductory class to law enforcement. What does that do is, I hope that gives me police officer recruits in the future, people are interested in the job. Part of the course is a day of how to apply for grants, scholarships, and how to apply to college in general, and how to fund yourself in college. That is just one of the examples of how we're trying to engage youth. Another is we're creating a youth advisory board. We're going to be taking applications now come January, or we already taking applications. We're in the process, and what's going to happen is we select a group of kids. We have a new partnership with Walmart. Walmart will give these kids interview clothing. These kids will go through an interview process with a panel from the city, and then when Walmart gives them that clothing, they will give them a day of training on the interview process, and then these kids will help us with community youth outreach for the rest of the year. They'll meet once a month, tell us what are the biggest topics in their mind involving youth and law enforcement, and then develop a training for that or an educational video, and then we will bring in mentors in the afternoon who will give them ideas about different careers. That's just kind of like a basics concept of it, but our commitment to youth with outreach is one of the biggest aspects of our community policing concept. Is we're partnering with the Albuquerque Public Schools on other projects such as Homework Diner. We're partnering with CNM. We're partnering with as many entities that we can, because like I said, the first principle of community policing is partnerships. The second principle is problem solving. And what we're doing is developing problem solving models of how do we get people into secondary education? How do we create that first positive contact with law enforcement? We had our first 2 youth camps last year with younger kids. We actually had a karate-based camp over Christmas break, because our concept there is how do we create the first positive experience with law enforcement? We want a positive experience instead of us being the lights and sirens when a child is 16 years old and they're basically driving the way that most of us drove at that age. So we want to establish a relationship before we get to that point. There's a commitment to community partnerships. We're trying to partner with the faith-based organizations. We meet with them once a month. We're trying to work on developing a base where we could put all the information on a phone app for our officers so that they could easily get to resources within the community to help individuals. Most of our calls for service aren't law enforcement related. A lot of times we get phone calls from families like, what do I do with my son, daughter, they're hooked on drugs? And what we want to do is build a resource base where we could point people in the right directions and get them to the resources that they need. A commitment to communication. We're working on, we've increased our use of social media. Our presentations, I give presentations once a week, the chief gives presentations. Our goal is to increase our communication with the community, and like I said at the very beginning, is have those tough conversations weeks, months, years before an incident occurs, that as a community questions are being answered. Those questions should have been answered way before, and there should just be an explanation of how a certain circumstance happened. Commitment to prevention. I think that we need to work with prevention, and I think that the police department and all the other entities involved need to understand the difference between prevention and intervention. I think a lot of people confuse those 2 concepts. Preventing crime, preventing people from going down the path of drugs, and intervening those that are engaged with drugs, and intervening with those that are already engaged in criminal activity. Those are the 2 biggest things that we need to do, is we need to find out and develop systems. We're working on the prevention angle with the county. We're trying to develop a program that's an early intervention program, officer-based. We know that people make bad decisions 18 to 25. I think most of us would agree that our worst decisions were when we were 18 to 25. A lot of times we put these people into the criminal justice system on minor crimes, and the criminal justice system actually turns them into greater criminals than we could have ever imagined. So our goal is to make sure that we select the proper crimes, because we don't want to put a dangerous person back into the community, but at the same time get them the resources they need. A case manager who can help manage whatever processes they're struggling with in life, and hopefully get them on the right track, so that we intervene in a way that is positive and helps them live a successful life, and not one that puts them in that cycle of incarceration that we deal with for the rest of their life with the criminal justice system. I think commitment to proactive enforcement. I think that last February timeframe, me and Chief sat down, and the number one goal we had was we didn't want to be number one for auto theft. I mean, I think that's a horrible designation to have. We'll talk about statistics later, but there is a slight possibility that we'll be out of the top 10 in auto theft for the country in 1 year. No other agency has done that, but it was a lot of proactive enforcement and a lot of changes how we work as a department. One of the things we did is we sent mass resources into the areas that showed for the largest auto theft problems. One of the other things we did is we realized a lot of our cases were being dismissed, and we tended to want to blame the DA's office, we wanted to blame the courts. Nobody looked at us and figured out how incomplete some of our cases were getting to the DA's office. Simple solution, we hired 6 paralegals that now organize and put our cases together for our officers, and the latest LSC report from the state stated that it almost doubled our indictment rates up to this point, which now affects the rest of the criminal justice system, because it makes it easier for them to prosecute and for them to go through the cases. So it's little changes like that, and being proactive on our law enforcement, but making sure that we're putting together a good quality product. Community outreach. Here are some of the examples of community partners. Commander Olivera in the Northwest Area Command started a partnership in the West Bluff shopping district. He came forward and he said, "Sir, I'd like a couple of bike officers." I thought it was a great idea, so we actually gave him double what he asked for. We gave him about 4 bike officers. Then we told the rest of the commanders, you now have the ability to have 4 to 6 bike officers in your area command for this outreach. And what he did is he organized all these businesses, officers patrolled it, and they greatly impacted and reduced crime, but they also generated and sparked that conversation. This went right along with one of the other concepts that we wanted to work on, is developing specific plans for specific areas. He recognized the increase in crime in the southern sector of his area command. We actually have broken the city into 6 areas. The Bloomberg study a few years back identified 6 areas where they believed crime was fueled for the entire city. When you look at the statistics, it's alarming. The home address of most offenders for property crimes throughout the city actually generated one of these 6 areas. The first area that they identified was the downtown area, basically from Broadway to about 12th Street. So what did we do? We created a public safety district and dedicated a number of officers. It's up to 12 officers and a lieutenant and a deputy chief who are now in charge of downtown safety. And crime is going down in the valley for the first time. Why did we do that? There's a variety of reasons. Number one, it's one of our focus areas. Number two, the city's never going to take off if we don't thrive and push for economic growth. Downtown is a big part of that. I'm a firm believer that we have to do what we need to do to ensure that our businesses thrive, because if they don't, it's all for nothing. We're never going to go anywhere as a city. So we've identified that area. Another example is in the southeast, the International District for years has had its fair share of challenges. What are we doing there? We just assigned 4 officers and a lieutenant, and our goal is eventually to have 12 officers. But in downtown, we got specific officers that know how to deal with the mentally ill, with the homeless, with substance abuse. In the southeast, our officers are going to engage youth, help kids stay in school, deal with gangs, deal with the specific problems to the southeast. In the northwest, we just talked about the West Bluff area. Those apartment complexes in the back is probably with, and people don't realize this, 6 homicides, 2018, in that one area. So we're gonna develop a team that works with the housing in the area to help ensure that we're doing everything we can to reduce and to filter and make sure that they have all the tools they need to select and get the right people in to have protective measures in place so that we see a decrease in these homicides. So each part of town has an area like that. On the southwest, it's the area of Coors and Central. We just sent a sergeant and 1 officer position was open for that area. In the northeast, it's the area of Carlisle and Montgomery. And in the foothills, it's the area of Central and Western Skies. Yeah, Western Skies trails always. So that's our plan, is developing specific responses to each various part of town. Foothills, homeless initiatives near I-40 and Trammell are some of the community partnerships that they're working on. In the northeast, they're working a lot of operations on local parks. In the southeast, Nobleville area crime strategies to reduce spike in commercial burglaries. The auto theft initiative started in the southeast. Anti-crime type plans in select neighborhoods on the west side. The Valley, the new downtown police district, committees to increase police presence using community policing to address problems there. The mayor said that Albuquerque is an economic engine for the state. We have to invest in downtown. That means APD needs to keep downtown safe. As we talked about, when we talk about, you know, the principles of community policing, the thing to remember is, number 1, partnerships, number 2, problem-solving activities, and number 3, transforming the department. And that third part means transforming our officers to believe in those first 2 principles of we've got to make partnerships and we have to develop problem-solving plans that look at root causes and realize that we're not going to just arrest ourselves out of this problem. Short-term, yes. Short-term through arrests and operations, we will reduce crime. We'll get people into the justice system that unfortunately may be the only way they get the help they need for it, because we know a lot of it is substance abuse based. But at the same time, the settlement agreement is a great way for us to ensure that we're going to transform the department. The compliance plan was developed by the compliance department. You know, DOJ was here because of the pattern and practice of excessive force. We quickly realized we have data collection problems. Well, that's one of the biggest struggles we have, and if you read the monitor's reports. So we're looking at purchasing new systems so that we could capture that data. One of the biggest pieces that we're working on right now is we are trying to get our officers to track their time. I think we should be able to respond to the community to say, number 1, this is how much time an officer spent patrolling a residential neighborhood. This is how much time they spent in this sector. This is how much time they spent in the business districts. We should be able to account for all our officers' time of what they're doing in the course of their shift. And those are some of the examples of how data tracking, I believe, will help us increase our transparency to the public as to what our police department is doing. Training our supervisors. I'm a firm believer that a strong, well-trained, proactive sergeant will identify problem officers early before they become larger problems and can save their career. Because a lot of times, a simple gut check by somebody is going to put somebody in line and get them doing things the way they need to. But it's when those things go unchecked and people take it a little further. So one of the biggest things we're doing is increasing leadership training, setting expectations, and holding sergeants and lieutenants accountable for their people. Is it popular? Not always. Nobody likes to be held accountable. But at the same time, I accept being held responsible. If crime starts going through the roof, if we can't hire officers, people should be asking me, Chief, what are you guys doing? I think the accountability has to start at the top and continue all the way down. And we're really quick to say accountability at the top. But sometimes in our profession, we didn't have that accountability at the first line supervisor level. And that's what we want to truly develop. Overall reform and culture change, that's the biggest part of it. And part of our culture change for community policing is community engagement and making sure that we're working with the community. And the settlement agreement, if you look into it, it has specific paragraphs that deal with community engagement, the development of community policing councils, the development of tracking information related to it, making sure that we follow and develop what are called SARA projects, which are problem-solving activities for community policing. Department of Justice, the modern team town, we're in town last month, that should have been changed. They evaluate our agency. They had the latest IMR report 8 come out, and this is where we stand in terms of compliance. Primary compliance basically means we've developed a policy. Secondary compliance is we've now trained to that policy. Third level compliance means we're showing we're in compliance and basically you're being monitored that you're doing everything right. 99.6% of the policies have been developed. So we're 99.6% in primary compliance. Secondary compliance, we're at 75.4. We're hoping that will get a big boost because a large portion of that is our use of force policy that we changed when we first came in. 2017, the number one complaint we heard from officers why they didn't want to do their job or what supervisors feared was that if an officer got into an altercation arresting somebody, it typically took lieutenants anywhere from 16 to 24 hours of watching video to determine if it was appropriate. Because they had to watch that video from the beginning to the end. And a lot of the supervisors were confused. There were actually a backlog of 325 cases that hadn't been investigated that we have to get through. And look, all the cases have been investigated, but because they were so old, they asked that we go through and do a secondary review on those cases. So what we did is we changed the use of force policy. Now, just like if we have a homicide, we send a team of officers out to investigate the homicide, so field officers aren't trying to investigate a crime that needs a lot of sophistication. We have a team that's going to investigate use of force. They will be more efficient, they'll be highly trained, they will be called out on certain levels of use of force, they will investigate it, so the supervisor so the sergeant could go back to supervising his or her squad, and so that the officer could get investigated quickly, and we don't have this problem of cases. There are cases up to a year old when I came back that hadn't been fully investigated. So we're hoping that that level jumps greatly, and once that jumps and the training occurs and the process is changed, we're hoping that will lead also to the operational compliance gaining a big jump. One thing to say, we embrace change. It's another to actually implement change. Everybody always talks about change, but what are you truly doing? And sometimes making those tough decisions are unpopular. Our academy had a practice that the Saturday before the academy started, cadets would come in, and the academy staff would put them through the ringer in a PT course. And we'd have several cadets quit that day because of the level of PT that was given to them on that day. I got wind that it was going to occur the 19th. When I talked to the chief, I talked to the new academy director, and I don't think the academy staff is necessarily happy because to them it's a tradition that's always been done to every APD class. But some traditions are best that they die off and they go away. And this is going to be the first academy class where that tradition is broken. Every agency has traditions, and that is one that we had to break, and that's one of the changes that we've implemented. We have to embrace the change and learn from past practices. We're putting community policing to everything we do at APD. We have to get these policies right, the training right, and we need to sound presence that ensures accountability and process. One of the biggest things that we always want to make sure we do is we engage the community, we work with the community, and some of the biggest ways that we want to do this is through conversation. So I know they put some questions out on your tables, but before we get to those questions and you guys get to your little groups, I just want to say that we continue to move forward. I assure you, officers will make mistakes in the future. we will own up to it when those mistakes are made, and we will investigate them. We will see what changes we have to make. But we're fully committed to number one, we need to reduce crime. Our families, our kids, my parents, my brothers, my sisters deserve to live in a crime-free city. That's why I gave up my retirement, a second paycheck, and I came back to the city of Albuquerque. Number two is we have to do everything we can for our kids to get to that next level. Because our kids getting to that next level and any obstacle we can take out of their way for them to succeed in school, for them to put off that first drink of alcohol to a later age, the studies show the younger you drink, the more likely you'll become an alcoholic. That will lead to other drugs. We have to do everything we can to help our kids get to that next level. And we have to develop a process of economic growth in the city. If we do those three things, I assure you that those are long-term solutions, and they will start feeding off each other and helping each other and making the city stronger and stronger. And I think that we just all have to have that commitment to communication, to working with one another, and continuing to move forward to make the city the best place that we can make this city, because it is our city ultimately, not the police departments, not any administration anywhere. It is the people's city for the city of Albuquerque. Does anybody have any questions before?
I do.
Yes.
You talked about the children's program and the youth and getting into the programs to develop future officers. Where are you doing that, and how did kids sign up? Do you have a flyer about that?
Last year we posted it on social media for our youth camp. It occurred at one occurred at the Boys and Girls Club in the Northeast.
Okay.
One occurred at Valley High School in the Valley. This next year it will be coming out on social media, and those initial camps will now be broken into area commands, because we want to make sure that every area of town has the ability to go to these programs. So each sponsor one of these youth camps this next year. One of the other partnerships we have is with the University of New Mexico. Some kids out to University Stadium. They spent the morning with watching football practice. We then were able to get them to engage with the football team while they did a series of drills on the football team. So it's just giving them those little, hopefully turning on light bulbs and saying, hey, this is something I'd like to do. And they got speech from everybody about making the right decisions and all those other things. But if you look on our social media, a lot of these events are advertised through our social media. The karate camp, they posted some information about it from Facebook just last week. We had a lot of different community partners for that, and I think they taught them like 6 different disciplines of karate over 5 days or anything. It was just an introduction, but as an engagement with law enforcement. Any other questions? Yes.
Crime statistics broken down specifically for the Southeast International District.
Yeah. Well, they get that ready. Just one thing is the crime stats question for the Southeast Heights. Like I said, if it wasn't clear, our crime stats are now posted on the webpage of the city, and it's broken down by area commander. Each area commander gets every month what their report card is on their crime. That's one of the big things we're doing, is holding the area commanders accountable for it, and we're posting it online. So if you look online, you'll find the specific stats for your part of town related to the previous month.
Good morning. Thank you, Deputy Chief Medina. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Sylvan, and I'm the Community Outreach Manager with the Albuquerque Police Department. I was appointed by Mayor Keller to take care of the Community Policing Councils. Before that, I worked for City Councilor Diane Gibson. She's the Councilor of District 7. And before that, I did other community organizing with other community organizations. So I'm here today to talk about the Community Policing Councils. Okay, what is a Community Policing Council, or a CPC? The Community Policing Council is designed to foster better relationships between the community and the Albuquerque Police Department. There are 6 community policing councils in our city, and each of these community policing councils corresponds with the area commands, how the Albuquerque Police Department divides the city into. The goal of the community policing councils is to engage in candid, deep detailed and meaningful dialogue between the Albuquerque Police Department and the city they serve. This map shows how the Albuquerque Police Department divides their area commands. So if you see, for example, I live in the Valley area, I live just south of Montano. If I wanted to go to a community policing council meeting, which are held at community centers or multi-generational centers around the city, I would attend the one in the Valley Area Command, which is at Johnny Tapia Community Center. That one meets the fourth Thursday of each month. That's how these community policing councils meet. They have regularly scheduled meetings that correspond with the day of the month. For example, we just had the Northeast last night, and they always have their meetings the second Tuesday of each month. And all of this information is online, so if you want to go there, you can find it out. Okay, history of the CPCs. We all remember when James Boyd, the homeless camper, was shot up in the foothills. After that happened, the previous administration, before the Keller administration, felt that there was a need for the community to discuss what needed to discuss with the police how they felt about things that were going on. Because as we know, before that, the Albuquerque Police Department had a huge use of force issue and continued up until that incident. The Department of Justice came in after the Boyd shooting, and they said, yes, the Albuquerque Police Department does have a serious use of force. So they created the CASA. I know that everybody keeps hearing about the CASA. And in the CASA, they actually wrote in that the community policing council shall be part of the CASA, which is a settlement agreement between the city of Albuquerque and the United States Department of Justice. Okay, let's skip that slide. Let's take this slide. So what happens at this community policing council's meetings? Well, this is an example of a recommendation form. The community policing council folks, when you attend a meeting, the meetings consist of voting members who sit up front and take your recommendations, or the voting members make recommendations to the chief. As you see, the recommendations are divided up into different levels, and like example D, you would make a recommendation advising the chief on recruiting a diverse workforce. The voting members who sit up front, they say, okay, audience members, please give me a recommendation, and we will vote on receiving and sending that recommendation forward to the chief of police. Examples of recommendations that our community policing councils have made to the Albuquerque Police Department are bike patrols. One police council, I think it was the Valley, they said, hey, chief, we need more bike patrols in our area. So the council sat down, cobbled together a recommendation, sent it forward to the chief, and the chief said, yes, I think we do need bike patrols in this area. Another recommendation, and this is one of my favorite ones that most people don't know about, is the Northwest, I believe, community policing council said internet exchange zones are very important. We need to have them monitored 24/7. And that recommendation was taken up by the Northwest Community Policing Council. It went up to the chief, and the chief said, yes, we should monitor internet exchange zones. What is an internet exchange zone? Well, if you buy something, for example, from somebody on Craigslist or Amazon or something like that, and you don't feel comfortable going to that person's house or having them come to your house, what you can do is you can go to a area command at a substation, and the area in front of it will be painted green like this, and your transaction is on camera. So that way you don't have to have the person show up at your house. Like for me, when I sold my exercise bike, a couple of guys showed up a few years ago when I did this, and I wanted to hop on that exercise bike and ride away. That's scary. So I wish I had known about this before I had this job. So Dr. Ginger is the monitor, and I know this is we've all heard about Dr. Ginger, and we've heard about the independent monitor. And real quick, what the independent monitor does is make sure that the Albuquerque Police Department is in compliance with the CASA, as Chief Medina said. And he comes out with this report. He comes out with the IMR 8, or independent monitor report. And our 8th report, as Chief Medina said, was really, really good this time. The independent monitor's report is divided into multiple sections, and the section that I want to talk about, that we're here today, and Deputy Chief Medina also talked about too, is the section of community engagement and oversight. And we've already talked about how primary compliance is one of the things that we're looking for, secondary compliance is the thing we're looking for, and operational compliance. That means that the department basically owns it. When we get into operational compliance, that means that we're doing this like we're breathing air or blinking our eyes. That means that it's in our system. So how are we doing as far as community engagement? Well, I know, and I want to be clear, the slide that Deputy Chief Medina showed earlier is the overall cost. So there's 300 and some paragraphs. This is just, in a nutshell, how we're doing on community engagement paragraphs. There's a section on this. So as you can see, we are at 100% primary compliance, secondary compliance, but we struggle with our operational compliance. And, you know, I'm here today to ask you, my ask is, what we struggle with is everybody who's on a community policing council is a volunteer. And volunteer work is, you know, hard. And it's another meeting to go to. But we struggle with diversity and many different things, attendance at our community policing councils. So my ask is go to the website, look, see where the community policing council is in your neighborhood, and attend. It's participatory democracy. My wife told me not to try to say that word because I'll say it too fast. But, you know, the beauty in this presentation, which I've done multiple times, and once I found out about this, and James Lewis even said this, a lot of people don't know that this exists. This is an opportunity for people to actually go, sit down, and have a dialogue with the police department and effectively change your police department. This is the national model for community police relationships with the community and police relationships. The independent monitor says that multiple times. Because there's other models, community policing councils around the country, but ours is one of the best ones. So if you have any questions, there's my contact information, and I could email this to whoever wants to have this slide. But I'm not going to end like that because the community policing councils are independent of the city and KPD. So I would rather
Could you go back to that slide? For
Yes,
a second?
sir.
Thank you.
They're independent of the city and the police department. When you apply for a community policing council position to be a voting member, I just send the applications to the voting members and they choose and interview who comes on. So instead of my contact information, it would be best if you actually go and look and see what these organizations are doing. So here's the Albuquerque, the Valley Community Policing Council. Foothills Community Policing Council has a web, Facebook page. They all should have one real soon. I know the Southwest is the only one that doesn't have one. This council, Southeast, wow. They even have a Twitter account. So if you want to check out and see what they do, they're the most social media savvy of all. So that's all I have today. Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, or I know the format is to break off into groups and ask these questions, but you can stand for questions right now.
I have a question. Did you say you were open for questions, or we want?
Absolutely.
Okay. I help as a neighborhood watch block captain in my neighborhood, and just curious about the relationship between the community police council and the neighborhood organizations and the crime prevention specialists as far as promoting communication and dialogue, as far as interacting with the community, getting back to the mayor's pledge of block to block cooperation. Do the neighborhood associations, are you expecting them to feed into the community police councils and then to the crime prevention specialist and then to the area substation commander? How does a line of communication work there for starting from the ground level, back to communication to the substation commander, and then of course to the chief's office.
Well, to answer your question, each of those areas are kind of siloed right now, and it would be nice if they all came together. And we discuss this all the time because sometimes attendance at community policing councils are low just because at the same time, for example, at the Northwest Community Policing Council, which is at Taylor Ranch Community Center, they'll have a meeting at the same time that a neighborhood association is having a meeting, and we're trying to figure out a way to, these folks should collaborate together and say, hey, you know, we'll attend your meeting, you attend ours, and, you know, just make the dialogue better.
And as you said, with volunteers, the time is essential, and going to meetings, and just it turns going to a meeting, and the volunteers don't want to go meeting to meeting. Thank you.
One of the problems was when the community policing councils were created, they were created as a policy advisor type of role to the city, to the police department. And neighborhood associations, block captains are very concerned generally and aren't limited to policy. They worry about crime, communication, working with neighbors. So I think that although they're named community policing councils, they're truly not based off of community policing concepts. The name has always been something that this administration said the name can be modified maybe at some point in time because their function is not directly related to something that neighborhood associations and community groups are going to feel that they get what they want in terms